It's Mark here at Primus English. We ran a simulation test last week, and I wanted to go over some global feedback on the IELTS Academic Writing Task 1. This is causing a lot of problems. I looked at about 13 or 14 tests, and only one person got a really good score here, and I'll show you why in this video. Again, this is over here at Primus English in Melbourne, Australia. And here are some of the tips that we'll go through. Now, in this video, we're going to look at a few things. Not that. We're going to look at some of the most common problems. And again, this is what this is the mistake that most people make when they do the test. So we'll look at one of the most common problems, and that's usually with analysis, not with language. Then I'll show you a written version of the task. And finally, we'll look carefully at some of the helpful grammar that's in it. All right, so why don't we just have a look? This is the task. So you can look at the small box at the top. It says the graph shows the average carbon dioxide emissions per person in the UK, Sweden, Italy, and Portugal between 1967 and 2007. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting main features and make comparisons. So take a few minutes right now. In fact, I tell my students, take 5 minutes and carefully analyze what you see. All right, it's always good, especially when you're practicing. Take the 5 minutes. Even if you sit there for 3 minutes doing nothing and only analyze it for 1 or 2 minutes, still a good practice. Okay, so press pause on the video and take a look. Okay, now the first thing that we'll talk about here is one thing that people never do, but it's quite easy to start doing, and that's look at the overall trend. Now, the overall trend is looking at this side. Okay, so we've got the CO2 emissions in metric tons. And the thing is, we've got them here in 1967 and here in 2007. So the first thing you always want to do is see this number. Has it overall gone up or down? You can see for some places it's gone down and for others it's gone up. And that's fine, but you want to see the overall trend. So if we do the math, you will see that even though these ones went up, because these ones went down, the overall number has decreased. Not a lot, but it has decreased. In fact, it's decreased by about 1 million tons. Okay, so I've added that in there. So that's the first thing you want to pay attention to. And this is the thing that, for a lot of people, it kills their test result. So from here, from 1967 to 2007, the overall number decreased. Okay, that's the first one. Secondly, yes, a lot of people did notice that UK is consistently the biggest one. Now I'll add that in here, that UK is the biggest. All right, so that's important as well. All right, so UK is consistently the biggest contributor of carbon dioxide. You can see here Sweden peaks and then falls. The other one, these ones are pretty straightforward. These two increase. Now, one thing to notice here, yes, you've got Sweden and Italy crossing. So Italy overtakes or surpasses Sweden as Sweden is coming down. Also here, Portugal, it starts at the lowest and it increases. Now, here's the interesting thing. It never really becomes, it's the lowest at the beginning, it's the lowest at the end, but it still showed the most increase. It went from about 1 or 1.1 to about 5.5. So it's increased almost by 5 times. So that's the biggest one. That's one thing they really look at, is even though it's a small amount, did it increase the most? So if we look at the notes here, right, Portugal and Italy are both down. Italy overtakes Sweden. And yeah, that's a good point. It narrows the gap with the UK. So it gets closer to the UK right there. Over here, you can see that Portugal increases. I'll move that. Portugal increases nearly 5-fold. It reaches the same level as Sweden, but is still the lowest. Okay? Even though it's the lowest, it's increased the most. It's showed the most change. And those are the kinds of details you need to get a 7 or 8 or higher. Now, why don't we take a look at an actual example? Let's move that. All right, so here's our example. Now, the first thing I always point out to my students is don't worry too much about changing this language into this language. This language here, all this, it's not really that important. You need it there, but if you spend too much time thinking about changing individual words or trying to paraphrase, it's just going to waste time. In the end, if you don't change it, they just don't count it in your word count, and that's fine. It just means that you have to make sure that after this, you write 150 words. Because even if you make small changes, it doesn't matter. They still won't count it. So just, you don't have to copy it, but if you do copy it directly, it doesn't make a big difference. Okay, as long as you get over 150 words. Now I've started here with our overall. So this is the summary, the main trend, the meta trend, what's happened in all of here. Overall, during the period, now I've said here, despite differing patterns between the countries, so even though there were differences, the most important point, the amount of CO2 emissions dropped from approximately 27 tons to 26 tons. These are metric tons, of course. So this is your main overall here. There was an overall slight decrease. That's all you need. I've added this in just for a little bit of extra flavor. Some of them went up, some of them went down. However, overall, it went down. So it's a nice little grammatical structure here. Despite differing. Always follow despite with a noun or an ing verb form, which is also a noun. Then we've moved on. So we said the UK and Sweden went down. So we focus on that. They both show a downward trend, as I put in my notes. I wrote up, I meant down. All right? So both the UK and Sweden showed an overall downward trend. The UK started at the highest of the group. So I add that in, all right, if you want to focus on the trend, at approximately 10.8 metric tons. And fell steadily, so we'll take a look here, and fell steadily until to 8.8 in 2007. I didn't change a lot there. You don't really need to go into all these small details about how it goes here. There's too much information. Some details you need, some you don't. Sweden showed an initial increase, rising from, and then again, here's that nice piece of grammar, rising from roughly 8.8 tons in 1967 to a peak of 10.3 in 1997. Okay, so again, this is a very nice piece of language. You follow it with the relative clause, or sorry, the participle clause. It showed an increase, comma, rising from, or falling to. Either are fine. From here, so that's very nice. I talk about 1997, then I say from here the amount fell steadily. Next point of grammar, by 2007, it had reached 5.5 tons. If you want to use that past perfect structure, and it's a beautiful structure for this because it talks about the past, and you can use by 2007. And please make sure that's really important. By 2007, it had reached 5.5 tons. And then I've gone a little extra, almost half its 1997 level. So I've pointed out the highest and the lowest is almost half, 50%. That's really important detail to have in there, right? It shows that you're not just describing it, but you're analyzing it. Think of this, if you're Sweden, if you're the government in Sweden, this is wonderful. If you live in Sweden, this is wonderful information. So you really want to focus on that. That's what you do in this task. Then, in contrast, Italy and Portugal showed strong upward trends. Comparing that, so now between our two paragraphs, we have overall downward. However, or in contrast, Italy go up. Italy began at roughly 4.5 tons and rose steadily, comma, surpassing Sweden, or you could write overtaking Sweden in 1987. By 2007, it had reached 7.5 tons. So again, I've done this again. By 2007, it had reached. And then I wrote here, narrowing the gap with the UK. So, it's come quite close. So that's a very nice way of putting it. Although it was half the amount here it narrowed the gap, so it came a lot closer. It's a nice piece of vocabulary. As well, this is a nice piece of grammar. This is that participle clause. It's very helpful in this task and other ones. Then I say Portugal showed immense change. All right, overall, big change. It started at the lowest level of the four. So now I'm comparing. Okay, that's important. I'm not just describing it, but I'm comparing it to the other ones. Approximately 1 ton. It then showed, again, a nice little connector to the previous sentence, a continuous upward trend. I should probably put a comma there. And reached 5.5 tons in 2007, comma, demonstrating or showing a nearly 5-fold or 5 times increase, and ending at the same level of Sweden. So this is really nice. Comma, ing, and ing. So it's a nice parallel structure as well. Then I added this. I added this just as a little extra sentence. Although it had started at the lowest amount in 1967, it had shown the most increase by 2007. Okay, so 1967 it started the lowest, but it showed the most increase. Or you could say maybe the most relative increase, meaning compared to the other one. All right, so compared to Italy, it showed a major increase. All right, so that's a key thing. So let's just take a look at everything we've done here. We've covered all our key points. You might add some information here as well. Actually, we said it's still the lowest. All right, so you might instead here say, although it is still the lowest amount in 2007, it showed a lot of increase. Now finally, final thoughts. Please remember, analyze the data carefully, especially when you're practicing. You want to be very good at reading data, all right? Practice it. It's not easy, and it's a whole other skill. Secondly, let's look at grammar. We have the past perfect, that's important. It had reached. Or the participle clause, reaching. Over here, right, surpassing Sweden, demonstrating an increase, and ending at the same amount. So that's really important. Really look at it. It goes comma, ing. Get some practice, which is the last point. Practice, practice, practice. Get feedback from your teachers. Get them to show you where the mistakes are happening. If you're trying to use this grammar, get them to help you make sure that you're doing it cleanly. All right, so that's all I wanted to show everybody. Again, biggest problems on these tests is people just describe things, they don't analyze. And, I've also included a few tips to help clean up the grammar a little. I hope that was helpful. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed.